You and I are not on the same level. Get out of here now!
I need your help. Let's see how different we are.
Security, drag her out!
A violin played softly in the glass-paneled ballroom of Maple Ridge Country Club. Under the crystal lights, everything looked perfect. Frosted champagne glasses, snow-white Vera Wang dresses, and a guest list filled with Seattle's elite. A middle-aged man stood silently near the bar, gently smoothing his pale blue tie, the only tie he owned. Raymond Cole, owner of a small appliance store in Portland, father of the groom. His suit cost only $300 and still smelled faintly of engine oil, despite being dry cleaned 3 times. But for him, today was the best day of his life. The day his son, Ethan, married the woman he believed would be his future. He wanted only one thing: to see his son happy. "Ray!" a female voice called out. Lillian Avery, the bride's mother, approached, her smile polite, but her eyes sharp as knives. "Would you come out with me for a moment?" They stepped into the stone-paved hallway, where the night air carried the scent of pine and wine. Beside her stood her husband, Dr. Thomas Avery, in a black suit and crimson tie, and her son Connor, the haughty face of a financier. Lillian smiled. "Raymond, tonight's party is a bit formal. Many of Madison's colleagues, lawyers from Harvard, flew in from Boston." "I'm afraid," Thomas interrupted, his voice soft but cold. "You might feel uncomfortable. People talk about work, law, politics. We're afraid you'll feel left out." Ray looked straight at them, his eyes soft but steady. "Thanks, but I'm fine. It's my son's day." Connor shrugged. "It's just, you can leave after dinner, just to make things smoother." He was silent. For a moment, the violin inside rose to a crescendo, then quieted down, like his heart. "Smoother?" he repeated, his voice hoarse with anger. Lillian smiled awkwardly. "Don't get me wrong, we just think different backgrounds can sometimes cause misunderstandings for guests." Different backgrounds. Time for 500 poems from one. The word to different cut like a knife. He bowed his head and said softly, "Thank you for being so direct." Then he walked slowly back to his seat. The party continued. Madison and Ethan danced in the center of the hall, laughter and champagne swirling through the air. Ray sat quietly, watching his son smile. He remembered 18 years ago, the boy sitting in the back of his truck, laughing as his father drove him to work. The hand that had once held his, now held another, colder, more calculating. Madison glanced at Ray. Her eyes swept over him, like a stain on the floor. A minute later, she left the group behind and walked toward him. "Frank, Raymond." Her voice was steel. "We need to talk." He stood up politely. "Okay." She led him out onto the terrace. The night air was humid, the city lights in the distance twinkling like cold stars. "Ray," she said, "I think it's time for you to go." He stopped. "Going home? The party's only halfway through." "Yes, and the rest is ours, the people of this world." She emphasized each word, her eyes cold as glass. "You ate. You took pictures. That's enough. I don't want my colleagues to have to explain about a man, she paused, choosing her words, with an old truck and a $300 suit. The wind blew hard. The decorative flags flapped against the railing. Ray smiled slowly, a tired, gentle smile. Are you saying I embarrass you? It's not me, she said coldly. It's us. Ethan is entering another realm. You don't understand. Inside, the music slowed down, and people raised their glasses. Ray looked through the glass and saw his son smiling, the same smile that made him work 70 hours a week just to give him a future. Then he looked back at Madison. You know, I thought you were good enough for him. She smiled faintly. You thought wrong. Then she said, loud enough to penetrate the glass, Get out of here. Inside, the laughter died. 150 heads turned. The bride, in her white gown, pointed her finger at him. At the man named Ray, the man who had paid for their education, with his blood and bones. Some guests panicked. Some pretended to be busy, staring at their glasses. Ethan stood still. No one defended him. Ray took a deep breath. All the sounds faded until there was nothing left but his heartbeat and the wind blowing through his silver hair. He nodded slowly. Okay. Walking between the two rows of tables, the yellow light cast a long shadow on him, trembling, like a wound. No one dared to look directly at him. Only a young waiter holding a tray of glasses whispered softly, Sir, are you okay? Ray paused and smiled faintly. Fine, son. Very fine. He opened the door and stepped out into the parking lot. The night wind was bitterly cold, but his heart was burning like a furnace. Before getting in the car, he looked back through the window. The bride was smiling, confident, as if she had just won a battle. He spoke softly, in a voice so low that only he could hear. No one wins when they forget to be grateful. The headlights flashed on, reflecting off the tears rolling down his cheeks. The old silver pickup truck started and drove out of the Maple Ridge gates, carrying a father who had been cast out of his own child's paradise. And the fire, that would one day burn down that entire fake world. That night, after the truck left Maple Ridge, it started to rain. Seattle was bathed in a golden, silvery light, reflected from hundreds of lamps and expensive umbrellas. The music had returned to the ballroom, but everyone knew the mood was different. Ethan sat at the center of a long, white tablecloth table, flanked by two worlds. On the left, the Avery family, a doctor father, professor mother, investment banker brother. Their smiles were cold as glass. On the right, Ray's friends, two Portland mechanics, their hands covered in paint and motor oil, looking down in embarrassment. And in the middle, Ethan, the only one who didn't know where he belonged. The glass in his hand trembled slightly. On stage, Madison smiled at the guests, her face as bright as if the words, "Get out of here," had never been spoken. She glanced at Ethan, her lips curling slightly, a smile not of love, but of power. "Are you okay?" she asked, leaning in close. "Yeah." "Don't be mad," she whispered. "It's just, you deserve a different life, a different class. You can't be dragged down by your background." The words came as lightly as a breath, but in Ethan's heart, they fell like concrete. Origin, class, words he never thought he'd apply to his own father. At the back table, Ray sat silently. The dim light barely reached him. He watched his son, the boy who once fell asleep on his shoulder every morning on the way to school, now smiling among people who saw him as nothing more than an upgraded social project. Each time Ethan bowed his head, Ray's gaze darkened a notch. A waiter brought him a new glass of wine and whispered, "Would you like to change seats, sir? It's a bit cold here." Ray laughed hoarsely. "No, I'm getting used to it. The coldness of a place that doesn't belong to me." From a distance, Madison raised her glass, telling the guests about her acceptance to a prestigious law firm in Boston. The applause was thunderous, like a shower of metal. Ethan smiled awkwardly, but his eyes were still fixed on his father. Only, he didn't stand up. Ray understood. Without anyone saying a word, he could still hear his son's silence. A silence more cowardly than betrayal. He had dreamed of this day, to sit in the front row, hearing his son thank him for all the years of sacrifice. But it turned out, all it took was a girl who knew how to say the right things, a look from a wealthy family, and his son was ready to cut off his roots. When Madison stepped up to speak, the spotlight shone on her blonde hair. "Thank you all for coming to our wedding," she said, her voice trembling, as if overcome with emotion. Then, almost by accident, she turned toward Ray's table. "We know not everyone understands silent sacrifices, but then effort always pushes us beyond our limits." A few of the guests smiled. Ray understood the implication. Old limits meant people like him. The glass in his hand no longer tasted like wine, only the iron taste of blood. He stood, saying nothing, not looking at Ethan, not at the bride, just at the crystal ceiling, where thousands of lights reflected like watching eyes. Each light, a judgment. Each reflection, a crack in the pride he had carried for a lifetime. Outside it was still raining. Each drop on his shoulder felt cold, a reminder that some parties were never meant for real people. The pickup truck waited under an old maple tree covered with fallen leaves. Ray opened the door and slid into the driver's seat. His hands trembled as they touched the wheel. In the distance, the wedding hall was still brightly lit. Inside, music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses filled the air. He turned the key, but didn't start the engine. The light from the clock reflected in his wet eyes, the eyes of a man who had just lost his entire world. The wind blew hard. The rain lashed against the windshield. He sighed and whispered softly, "Sometimes people are not poor because of lack of money, but because they forget how to bow their heads in gratitude." The wheels rolled slowly off the paved road. An old country song played on the radio, a song Ethan's mother used to love. And amid the rain, the singer's hoarse voice recalled the years. Ray had given up everything just to give his son a chance to hold his head high. But tonight, that same child bowed his head, not out of humility, but out of shame. The last lights of Maple Ridge faded in the rearview mirror, and in his heart, a question echoed, so bitter and true that it made every listener's chest tighten. If it were you, between honor and class, would you choose to side with your lover or the person who sacrificed their whole life for you? A. Parents. B. Lover. C. Both. But how? The Seattle rain had not yet stopped. Rainwater slid down the windshield, streaking like a memory. From afar, the wedding hall was still brightly lit, silhouettes still dancing, laughter mingling with the music, as if no father had ever been thrown out of there just because he didn't fit in. Ray sat in the car, his suit jacket soaked. The cold from the leather seat seeped into his shoulders, but a fire smoldered in his chest. He flipped open his phone. The screen reflected his face, wet, silent, and hard as steel. The first name on the list, Samuel Drake, the financial advisor, the one who had every file he'd ever prepared for Ethan and Madison. 3 years ago, Ray had set up 2 private loans, private educational loans, but he kept them secret, a quiet way to help, no strings attached. But tonight, everything changed. He took a deep breath and pressed the call button. On the other end of the line, a deep, professional male voice answered, "Samuel Drake listening." Ray looked out the window, where the wedding lights danced in the rain. He spoke, each word cold as metal. "Sam, it's me, Raymond Cole. I need you to enable the acceleration clause for 2 accounts." A short silence. "Are you sure, Ray? Which 2 accounts?" "Ethan Cole and Madison Avery. Total, about $430,000. I know exactly how much. It's my money. Now, it's time for them to pay." Samuel sighed on the other end. "I've never heard you sound like that, Ray. What happened?" Ray looked down at his hands, calloused, bleeding from years of work, hands that had held electrical wires, fixed machines, taken his children to school. Now, they only trembled slightly on the steering wheel. "I just realized, respect has a due date, Sam." His voice was even and unshaken. "Pitch go first, rate slow. Send confirmation to my house by Monday morning. Both accounts, subject to Clause 7B, acceleration clause, upon lender discretion. You know that will trigger the entire debt at once. They'll have to pay in 30 days. I know. And Ethan is your son. I know that too." The sentence was short, but it cut like a knife, straight through the chest. The other end went silent, then only the sound of an electronic pen and a hoarse voice. "Okay, Ray. It starts Monday morning." He turned off the engine. No sighs. no curses. Just sat there, listening to the steady patter of rain on the roof, each drop like a countdown to collapse. Ray opened the drawer and took out an old file. Each page represented a year of hard work. Tuition, Harvard Law, Madison Avery, $82,000 per year. Housing, books, fees, $47,000. Social work degree, Ethan Cole, $35,000 per year. The ink had not faded, but the faith had died. He whispered softly, as if speaking to his late wife. I did my best, baby. But maybe, sometimes, blind love is a sin. The car headlights cast a half-light, half-dark shadow on his face. Outside, the wedding fireworks exploded in the sky. The beams of light burst in the rain, the red glow spreading across the car window, like blood. He looked at them, eyes half closed, his voice soft, but firm. Nice, Madison, but no fireworks, bright enough to cover up contempt. The engine roared to life. The sound was dry and cold, piercing the night. The silver pickup rolled out of the parking lot, its headlights blurring in the rain. On the way back, the radio automatically played the weather report. Next week, Seattle will have 3 days of heavy thunderstorms. Ray curled his lips. Storms are good too. At least all the dirt will be washed away. The next morning, as the first light of day touched Portland, 2 emails were sent, one to Ethan Cole, one to Madison Avery. The subject lines were identical. Notice of loan acceleration, payment due in 30 days. No message, no anger. Just a cold notice of justice, written in the only language they understand, money. Ray stopped the car by the side of the highway. He opened the door and took a deep breath of the pine-scented air. The cold wind blew through his collar, sweeping away the tears he had yet to shed. Only one thought remained in his mind. They turned love into a contract. Let the contract teach them a lesson about love. The sun rose, reflecting off the hood of the car. His face hardened in it, no longer the weak father, but a man who knew the price of respect. Amidst the morning mist, a question softly escaped, echoing in his head. And perhaps, a question for anyone who has ever been looked down upon. If someone slights you after receiving all your favors, would you A. Keep quiet. B. Seek justice. C. Forgive, but let them live with the burden of gratitude forever. 3 days after that fateful call, what Ray didn't expect was that he didn't need to do anything more. The rest would be done for him. A 4-minute video appeared on Reddit, then spread to TikTok, Twitter, and finally, Facebook. Title: Bride Kicks Father-in-Law Out of Lavish Wedding, and the Ending. The footage was shaky, but the sound, clear. Madison's voice echoed over the lights and music. Get out of here. You don't belong here. And the gray-haired man in the cheap suit just nodded and walked away quietly. No one knew who filmed it. All they knew was that the clip went viral. 4.3 million views in 48 hours, 200,000 comments, thousands of shares with hashtags. Respect is priceless. Father of the Year. Ungrateful. Bride. In the comments section, people wrote, "He deserves a statue." There is no greater pain than watching your own child silently watch you humiliated. Does she think class is in her wedding dress? Madison Avery, the Harvard star who once boasted of her perfect background, was brought down from her pedestal with just one ill-timed remark. In her luxury apartment in downtown Seattle, Madison slumped in her chair, her phone screen glowing. Messages kept coming. Foster, Lyndon, and Marks emailed, "Due to media coverage, we have suspended your associate position until further notice." Her hands were shaking as she read, her lips bleeding. Her mother, Lillian, tried to comfort her. "Madison, it's just temporary. The press will forget it soon." But she didn't know. The hashtag was trending #1 nationwide. Morning News read clearly, "New Harvard graduate accused of disrespecting father-in-law. Incident goes viral with over 5 million views." The host emphasized, according to sources, the man in the video is Raymond Cole, a Portland mechanic shop owner who sponsored the bride's tuition. America woke up with the same question. Who really has class? Meanwhile, Ray was sitting in a small cafe near the electronics store. The TV on the wall was playing the same video. The waitress, a young girl, recognized him. "You are the one in the clip, right?" He chuckled softly. "Maybe so." She put down her coffee cup and whispered, "I'll send it for free. A person like you deserves respect." Ray just nodded, his eyes on the street. Outside, passers-by glanced furtively. A few took secret photos, but he didn't care. What he needed wasn't fame. It was balance. As he got to his car, his phone vibrated. A text from Ethan. "Dad, I know. I didn't expect things to turn out like this." Ray didn't reply. He just looked at the message, then hung up. Because to him, late regrets were as cheap as that wedding dress. In Boston, the law firm Foster, Lyndon, and Marks called an emergency meeting. One manager said, "She hasn't even started yet, and she's already making headlines. We can't keep someone who's caused a national scandal." The contract was torn up that night. At the same time, the Bar Association of Washington issued a statement. Open an ethics investigation into Madison Avery for unethical conduct. From the heights of fame, she plummeted to rock bottom, and every camera was recording the fall, inch by inch. Ray didn't gloat, nor was he happy. He just sat on the porch, listening to the wind blowing through the wires. He had learned that justice doesn't need a scream. It needs a video and a truth so clear that no one can defend it. The phone on the table vibrated, a text message from Samuel Drake. Rate Ma, slow pitch. "Ray, you don't have to do anything. The world has done it for you." He smiled. "I know, but sometimes silence is also a sentence." Final scene. Madison sits alone in a dark apartment, the light from her laptop screen illuminating her pale face. She plays the video again, rewinding the part where she points at him. Her lips tremble as she reads the same lines. "Get out of here." And for the first time in her life, she wished she could stay silent. The last light faded, leaving only the sound of the wind and the unread text message from Ethan. The question rang out like a reminder to the audience, sharp but chillingly true. When the world sees your naked truth, which will you choose? A. Blame others. B. Admit it and face it. The media storm had passed, but its ashes still burned in the Seattle air. 2 weeks later, as the public opinion began to die down, Madison Avery announced that she would be re-wedding. Nothing fancy, just intimate, she told the press. A way to do it again, to clean up her image. But little did she know, the truth never stayed quiet. That afternoon, St. Paul's Cathedral was filled with sunshine. White flower gates, a simple altar. 50 guests, mostly old acquaintances, and a few reporters who happened to stop by. The bells rang 3 times. The scent of candles and lavender wafted through the air. Everyone thought the ceremony would be peaceful, until a silver pickup truck stopped at the steps. Ray stepped down, in an old blue shirt, carrying an oak box. His steps were slow, but each one made the tiles vibrate. Several guests turned to look, whispering softly. The father who had been chased away that day was back. The church doors opened, and Madison emerged. She was dressed in a simple white dress, no longer brightly lit, but her pride still sat heavily on her shoulders. When she saw him, her face changed color. What are you doing here?" Ray set the wooden box down on the steps. His voice was deep and clear. "I brought you something you forgot at your last wedding." The guests looked at each other. Madison tried to keep calm. "Are you ruining my wedding again?" Ray didn't answer. He just opened the box. Inside were hundreds of neatly clipped sheets of paper. Bank receipts, transfer slips, loan contracts, tuition vouchers. The sunlight shone on the surface of the papers, making them glitter, like metal. He took out the first sheet and held it up. "Here's the first-year tuition at Harvard Law, $82,000. Here's the second, third year, books, housing, bar exam, total, $247,000, plus Ethan's, $153,000. All from my account. No scholarship funds. No one else, and no thank you." A murmur rose. Someone stepped back, phone in hand, recording. Madison trembled. "You have no right to do this." Ray looked straight at her. "You had the right to insult me in front of 150 people, in the middle of a lavish wedding. I have the right to tell the truth, in front of 50, in a church." His voice wasn't loud, but it resounded like a bronze bell. Ethan walked out from inside, his face pale. "Dad, can you stop?" Ray turned to his son. His eyes filled with more pain than anger. "No, Ethan. There are things that, if left unsaid, people will believe that silence is acceptance." Everyone was silent. Ray opened the box again and pulled out a small letter, the handwriting old and worn. "It was from your mother, Ethan. She wrote it before she died. She wanted you to get an education, so I promised. Even if I had to work 80 hours a week, I would make it happen. And I kept my word." Madison bowed her head, tears falling on her white dress. Everyone's eyes were fixed on her, like needles. Ray looked at her one last time. "You said class is something you're born with?" "No. Real class lies in how you treat those who have elevated you." A guest, one of Madison's old colleagues, whispered softly, "Real love, not fake thanks." The phrase spread, becoming a murmur, then applause, before it surged like a storm. Madison burst into tears, not because she was offended, but because for the first time, she saw the true price of arrogance. Ray closed the box and placed it right in front of the church door. "I leave this here as evidence and as a farewell." Then he turned and walked away, without looking back, without knowing whether the service would continue or not. Behind him, the church bells rang again. But this time, the sound was like a bell of judgment. As he stepped down the steps, the light fell on the wooden box. The statements inside fluttered in the wind, no longer papers, but a verdict of truth. People looked at him, a father who lost in love, but won in honor. The last question echoed softly, like a knife stabbing deep into the heart. If you were Ray, when justice was on your side, would you A. keep quiet, to keep the peace, B. stand up, to regain your honor, C. make the truth ring, so the world remembers? The church bells still rang in people's memories. When the next morning's newspaper appeared on every shelf, Harvard bride exposed at re-wedding, father-in-law releases proof of full tuition payment. The story had transcended family boundaries. Now it had become a national story of gratitude and pride. Madison Avery, a former Harvard honors student who once gave a commencement speech on legal ethics, has now hired a criminal defense attorney to countersue Raymond Cole for financial coercion and defamation. The press conference was held in a small office in Boston. She appeared in a black suit, her face gaunt, her voice trembling, but still trying to sound professional. "He manipulated me with money," she said. "Those payments were a subtle form of control. I did not sign any coercive contracts, and I was publicly defamed." That sentence could have saved her, if not for the fact that every camera in the world had already recorded the opposite. 3 days later, the law firm Foster, Linden & Marks released a new statement. "We confirm that Ms. Madison Avery has been terminated from her partnership due to ethical violations and fraudulent tuition claims." The Bar Association of Washington added, "Ms. Avery's lawsuit lacks legal basis and shows signs of misrepresentation of facts." The media was no longer on her side. Newspapers that once praised the Harvard star now printed headlines like, "From the top to the bottom, when one arrogant word becomes a lifelong sentence." Meanwhile, in Portland, Ray read the news on an old iPad. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply said one sentence, cold enough to make the audience shiver. "Nothing is so cruel as the truth, proven by receipts." Samuel Drake called. "You win, Ray." Ray replied, calmly, "No, Sam. I just took back what they thought I didn't deserve. Respect." 2 months later, the case was dismissed. Madison lost her consulting contracts and her license to practice. Left with no choice, she applied to Boston Legal Aid, a legal aid office for low-income families. Salary, $82,000 a year. Her luxury apartment in Seattle, sold. Her Mercedes, gone. From Harvard star to a grassroots lawyer, helping the poor, just like the father she once despised. Late one evening, after assisting a single mother with a welfare claim, Madison sat alone in the empty office. The fluorescent light fell on an old photo, her and Ethan, smiling under the Maple Ridge lights. Her hand trembled as she turned the photo over. On the back, a single line written in pencil by Ethan. "Thank you for teaching me that love." shouldn't have a price. She burst into tears, not for loss, but for realization. The most expensive price in life is the free lesson we refuse to learn. In Portland, Ray stood outside his old shop. The sign still read Cole Mechanical Services. A young mechanic handed him a cup of coffee, whispering, "Uncle Ray, customers say if you take the job, they won't haggle, because people like you do everything fairly." Ray smiled. Justice is something you earn with your hands, not with a Harvard degree. That night, he sat on the porch, looking at the streetlights. The oak box lay open beside him, the papers still inside, silent witnesses to everything. He whispered softly, "I don't need to win in front of people. I just need them to remember. No one is allowed to despise real sacrifice." The wind carried the laughter of workers leaving the shop, and in that moment, justice was no longer a battle. It was peace, the kind only those who have suffered truly understand. The final question rings out, quiet but sharp as a blade turned inward. If you had the chance to prove yourself right to someone who wronged you, would you? A. Remain silent, letting time take its course. B. Strike back and let the truth speak for itself. Or C. Forgive, but let them live in their own shame forever. After every storm comes dawn. And for Raymond Cole, it came late, but so bright, it caught all of Portland's attention. 3 months have passed since the lawsuit. No one talks about the Harvard bride anymore, but everyone knows the electrician who made America bow down in respect. Cole Mechanical Services, once a small, forgotten shop, now had trucks lining up to wait their turn. People came not for the low prices, but for the name Ray Cole, now a synonym for honor. A local newspaper wrote, "The electrician who was kicked out of his son's wedding is now a symbol of honest labor." Ray appeared on the cover, jacket stained with oil, eyes smiling faintly. He gave few interviews, only saying, "I'm not taking revenge on anyone. I'm just fixing the system, like I've been doing all my life." But there was one person who hadn't set foot in the shop in 3 months. Ethan, the son he once called his whole world, now carried a shame heavier than any debt. That afternoon, as the orange sun swept across downtown Portland, Ray was wiping his hands after a long shift when he heard a car pull up. The door opened, and Ethan walked in. His shirt wrinkled, his eyes tired. No one spoke for a few seconds. The clock on the wall ticked, as if counting each heartbeat. Finally, Ethan knelt down. "I'm sorry, Dad." Ray froze. He had waited years for those words, and yet, when they came, they were as light as a breath of wind. No anger, just the truth. Ethan's voice cracked. "I was silent when I should have protected you. I let them talk, let her humiliate you, let people laugh at my father. I deserved to be despised." Ray stepped closer, looking at his son, once small in his arms, now tall, yet fragile as a child. He placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder and said softly, "Forgiveness is easy, Ethan, but respect, you have to learn it all over again." That evening, father and son sat on the factory steps, watching the red sun sink behind the rooftops. The sound of machines and workers' laughter echoed behind them. The sound of real life. Ethan asked quietly, "Do you regret it?" Ray smiled faintly. No, because in the end, I didn't lose my child. I just lost my illusion. A wind blew, carrying the smell of metal, sweat, and a freedom that money could never buy. Ethan bowed his head, tears falling onto his father's calloused hands. For the first time, he understood. This man never needed wealth. He only needed respect. That night, Ray locked up the shop. Inside, his wife's old photo rested on the table again, and beside it, a new one. Father and daughter, with imperfect but genuine smiles. Before turning off the lights, Ray whispered softly, "The darkness never kills anyone. It just helps us recognize who's worthy to walk into the light with us." Outside, Portland lit up. A silver truck rolled down the street, its new decal shining under the lamplight. Cole Mechanical, built on integrity. Each time the wheel turned, you could almost hear the sound of a soul being reborn, not with money, but with dignity. And now that question is for you, the person who has ever been hurt, the one still holding the memory. If one day, the person who hurt you came back to apologize, which would you choose? Time 600 mems. A. Forgive and forget. B. Forgive but never forget. Or C. No need to forgive, just learn to respect them. It had been half a year since Ethan had knelt down to apologize. The maple trees on Ray's porch had begun to shed their leaves, glowing red like the fires of an Oregon autumn. The storm of honor had become a mere breeze, but in that silence, new news had arrived. Early that morning, Ray was making coffee, his favorite country music playing softly on the radio. Ethan knocked on the door. No suit, no tie, just a plain-looking guy, his eyes brighter than before. "Dad," he said, his voice strange. "She's pregnant." Ray paused for a second. The morning light filtered through the window, illuminating a face that had been hardened by too much pain. Then he smiled, a light smile. "Well, there's another baby in the Cole family." Ethan sat down, his hands clutching his hot coffee. "I don't know whether to be happy or scared, Dad." Ray put down the coffee pot, his voice deep and warm. "You're scared. That's good. Because being scared means you know responsibility is about to begin." Ethan was silent. Outside, sparrows were calling to each other on the red maple trees. Ray looked out and continued, "When you become a father, you will understand. Love is not free. It is a loan of honor. The more you love, the more you must repay in time, with sacrifice." Ethan bowed his head and said softly, "I want to name her Grace, not to forgive, but to remind me that every favor counts." Ray laughed gently. "That's a good name. Grace, the best debt in life." He stood up and opened the porch door, letting in the morning sunlight. The smell of coffee wafted out, mixed with the scent of damp leaves. Beneath the maple tree, the oak box still lay there, the thing that had once been opened to reveal the truth, now lying still, as a witness to all forgiven mistakes. He slowly walked over, brushed the thin layer of dust off the lid, and whispered, "Every wound will become a memory, if one learns from it." That same afternoon, he returned to the workshop. The young worker asked, "Uncle Ray, why don't you open another branch? The shop is very famous now." Ray shook his head and smiled. "The more things you have, the easier it is to forget where you started. I just want to do enough so that I don't owe anyone anything. money or affection? The worker was silent, just nodded slightly. That sentence then spread among the workers like a proverb of working life. Owe no one, not even self-respect. As the sun set, Ray sat on the porch, watching the afternoon light fall through the maple leaves. In his cold cup of coffee, he saw the reflection of his deceased wife's face, a gentle smile, peaceful eyes. He spoke softly, his voice as if whispering to the wind. You see, everything falls into place in the end, not through revenge, but through karma. The song Simple Man came on the radio. Ray closed his eyes and let himself be carried away by the music, feeling a sense of peace that he had never felt before. In Boston, Madison sat in her small office, writing an application for immigration legal assistance. On her desk was a family photo, taken from their brief meeting the day before. Her, Ethan, and Ray. She touched the photo lightly, smiling. Not because the past no longer hurt, but because she finally understood. An apology may be late, but it is never meaningless. Night fell. The moon shone through the maple leaves and fell on the oak box on the porch. The silver light flashed, like the end of a story that had been written, but its echoes would remain forever in the hearts of those who listened. Ray closed his eyes and leaned back on the wooden chair. His voice was low and hoarse, fading into the wind. Respect isn't charity, it's payment due. Respect isn't charity, it's payment due. One last question for you. The person who has been on this journey with Ray. If one day, the person who hurt you truly changes and comes back, what will you choose? A. Open your heart to start over. B. Keep your distance, but not hate. C. Stand still. Let them pay the rest of their debt. With time,